The heart of the city is locked in with the Knicks. What's up, guys? It's EJ Stewart, joined by Tommy Beer. You're listening in to Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast in Audacy, WFAN original. This is an important episode we're doing because we'll be talking about the Josh Hart extension that is being finalized as we speak. We record this podcast on Wednesday. News coming down earlier in the afternoon. Josh Hart and the Knicks finalizing a contract extension. We'll give you guys the details on those numbers for Josh Hart, and we'll have a discussion about what comes next for the Knicks, because now that the Josh Hart deal is behind them, there are plenty of other orders of business for the Knicks to handle. So we'll be talking about that and plenty more right after this.
If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
As I mentioned, my guy Tommy Beer joins me as always. Tommy, we knew this day would likely come, and now here we are, Josh Hart locked in.
Yeah, we assumed it. It had been rumored. It was probably safe to assume there was a wink-wink agreement when he opted to the 5 year of his contract. But as we know, stranger things have happened in pro sports where weird things go down. So good news for the Knicks today. We'll get into the particulars. It wasn't a steal value of a contract for the Knicks. We'll talk about kind of the particulars, the details, the percentage of the cap, the annual salary, etc. But long story short, it's a good day for the organization. Josh Hart's a winning player. He's a key guy you want on your team. He obviously has chemistry with the team's most important player. CA guy, there's just a lot of familial connections. Obviously has a relationship with DiVincenzo. He could be viewed as his unselfishness opted, even though he definitely secured the bag, a month later, allowed the Knicks some luxury tax wiggle room to bring in DiVincenzo. So big picture, take home point before we get into the kind of the minutia. Knicks are going to be better because they have Josh Hart in their building for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yep, and we're about to talk about it all. Again, this is Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast and Audacy WFAN original. It's a podcast you can get wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Be sure to hit the auto download feature on your streaming server to get these episodes every time we drop. During the off season, we drop 2 times a week. So here we're doing this episode here talking Josh Hart. Of course, you can also follow us or watch us on YouTube as well. We post full episodes and shorts from the episode on the WFAN channel, so make sure you check us out there. So let's begin with Josh Hart and the Knicks finalizing this agreement as we speak. ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski had the report. The Knicks are finalizing a contract extension with Josh Hart for 4 years, $81 million. Hart's agents with CAA disclosed the details to Woj with ESPN. As of Wednesday, both sides are working on the final details of the contract. And Josh Hart, who is currently with Team USA preparing for the World Cup, we mentioned how he did not play in the previous exhibition game, their first game against Puerto Rico. It was deemed for quote-unquote rest. We now know it actually was quote-unquote contract. That's what they probably should have put on the injury report. That was why he has not played, and that's smart on his part not to risk any kind of injury. And the reporting is once this contract gets resolved, then Josh Hart will then resume full activities with Team USA. So this $81 million contract extension is the maximum the Knicks could have offered, is 140% of the value of his player option that he accepted to play for on this upcoming season for $12.9 million. Then Hart will begin starting with $18 million when the contract kicks in, this new contract extension, $18 million the following year. That'll be 2024, 2025. Hart was acquired by the Knicks prior to last season's trade deadline in New York. Hart averaged 10.2 points. He averaged or shot 58% from the field, 51% from three, and also averaged 7 rebounds. The Knicks were 17-8 down the stretch of the regular season when Josh Hart joined the team. So I asked you, Tommy, are you surprised that the Knicks got this deal with Josh Hart to essentially be a full max of what he could have got? We've talked about, will they shave off a couple of million? Will we give them some money back here? Josh Hart getting the full maximum extension he could have got for the Knicks, 140% of his previous contract, so he gets the full $81 million. Are you surprised by that?
Yeah, I'm certainly not shocked. There were rumors that he could settle in around 75 million, shave a few million off here and there. We still don't have the full details, whether they'll be fully guaranteed. Is there a player
Right.
option? Is there a team option on the final season? Is some of that 81 million in the form of unlikely incentives, likely bonuses, things along those lines. So it's still possible that it's not a fully guaranteed 81 million. But yeah, just so for the breakdown, obviously the 29 million this season, this upcoming 23-24, make 18.1 the next, 19.6, 21.1, 22.5. So that sums out to the full 94 million to make over the life of the next 5 years of the contract. Important to note, here are the percentage of the Knicks' total salary cap that those numbers account for. So next year, he's only making 9.5% of the team's total salary cap. And as you over the 4 years, 12.8, 13.1, 13.4, 13.7. So when you look at that $22.5 million number, it seems like a lot in that final year of that contract for a player that's going to come off the bench, etc. Remember, it's less than 14% of the team's total salary cap. And obviously, you can re-sign players. They'll be able to re-sign Brunson and exceed that cap, etc. So looking at that in that context, keeping a player like Josh Hart in-house, it made sense to it's clear that he wanted to be here. It was clear that the Knicks wanted him to here. Why haggle over a few million? Keep the player happy. Show Brunson you're going to take care of his buddies. There's some other stuff that kind of gets kind of mixed up into the recipe here. So yeah, I'm not surprised. I don't think it's a steal. I don't think it's an incredible value for the Knicks. But I do think it's solid value. I think it's a fair contract for both the player and the team. And I think, as we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, I think it was essential to bring Josh Hart back. And I think bringing him back should have been one of the priorities for the team this offseason. And it clearly was. Not just to bring him back for 1 year, but to keep him as the Knicks are building something here. And he's now clearly part of that one of those foundational cornerstones.
Yeah, exactly. He's a core piece of what the Knicks are trying to build moving forward. And people who may be concerned or not happy, I don't think there are too many people. There are some people that look at those numbers and get a little worried. I mean, to me, he earned this money. I mean, this was a contract year for Josh Hart, and he came to New York and just changed the entire dynamic of the season. I mean, you cover this team every season. But for me to do a podcast, so I'm having week to week conversations about how the season is going, and you could probably just hear the tenor of our voices, the excitement of our analysis with this team, how it changes from the minute Josh Hart wasn't on this team to the minute he is. Like you could probably just listen to those shows and listen to some of the conversations we were having about how the season was going. I was probably still saying they got to get rid of Tibbs. I mean, there was so many things that were going on that there was a lot of uncertainty behind this season was going to go. There was no guarantees the Knicks were going to make the playoffs. Not even the playoffs. They were not in the top six. They were fighting for their lives. And we were saying, hey, they look like a playing team. Let's see what's going to happen. And then Josh Hart comes in, and the Knicks play essentially at an elite level down the stretch with him. And then you saw what he did in the first round against Cleveland. He was one of the most important pieces in that series. He essentially was one of the guys that kind of won them game one with some of his play and some of the big shots he made and the defense he played. Like, I mean, he earned this contract. Now to continue to live up to this contract, it's up to him to continue to provide value. But I think when you're giving big money to players, you look beyond the player, you look at the character, you look at who he is, and you say, is this the kind of guy that's going to change because he's now, set in terms of his contract? Is he not going to put in the right kind of work? He's not going to play with the right kind of attention to detail or the right kind of intensity. And Josh Hart, just by all accounts, is an A1 character type guy. So if there was any guy I wouldn't be as concerned about in terms of, did we get hoodwinked by a guy playing in a contract year, Josh Hart would be one of those guys.
100%. And, if you look back, over the past couple of years, he's been able to contribute in a way that few players have. I wrote it about it in the newsletter that I posted this afternoon. Dating back to the start of 21-22, he's averaged 11.9 points on 51.6% shooting, 7.5 rebounds, 4.0 assists, 1.1 made three-pointers, 1.1 steals. Only 7 players in the league have averaged 7 boards, 4 dimes, a steal, and a 3 per game during that stretch. Jokic, Embiid, LeBron, Siakam, Tatum, and Doncic. Jokic and Embiid are the only 2 players to post those numbers and also shoot above 50% from the floor. Again, those are a bit arbitrary numbers, but it speaks to the well-rounded aspects of his game. And, there's a couple things when you're signing a guy to long-term deals for a decent chunk of change. One, as you mentioned, character, and it's hard to find anyone with a bad word to say about Mr. Hart. And the other thing is, can a guy contribute? Will his game appreciate or depreciate over the life of the contract? And Hart is one of those guys where his shooting's going to, he shot 50% from 3 essentially when he arrived at the Knicks in the regular season. Yep. That wasn't going to sustain itself, and that came back down to earth. But he still finds ways to contribute, whether it's defensively, often, we joke he only has one move that Euro step over.
Yeah.
But it's effective. He gets after guys defensively. He's going to hold his teammates accountable. All those things that you want. So much of what the Knicks have done, a reason that Knicks fans are excited about the future is not just because of the talent on the floor, but the approach, the stars on the team, their approach to the game. You see it in Brunson, most importantly. Hart's a key piece of that. DiVincenzo, seems to, be cut from the same cloth. And it doesn't seem to be a coincidence that they're 3 Villanova guys that played and cut their teeth under Jay Wright. So again, there's just there's a lot to like. And as we mentioned, we were both on the same page when it was rumored the Knicks might trade for Josh Hart. Go get Josh Hart. We both wanted.
Absolutely.
We were both really excited about what he might bring to the table. He even exceeded our expectations with how well he played. The Knicks were the best bench team in the NBA for the 2 months after Josh Hart arrived in the deal. He finished the year with the Knicks' best plus minus per 36 minutes. And again, as we've talked about time and again, we mentioned it earlier this week, Hart is one of those guys that could have fit in well alongside the 90s Knicks. And to me, that's the biggest compliment you can pay a Knicks player.
Yeah, Hart, I 100% agree. He would have fit in totally with those 90s Knicks. Nice guy, but a guy who's an absolute pit bull, though, on the court. And that's what we've seen from him. And I think the important thing, for me to follow with his career as a Knick moving forward, we know this contract's value is going to increase. The Knicks have gotten fortunate with some of these other deals where they've been able to have, depreciating value on the contracts. And there's a lot of guys that essentially become super bargains by the time they get to the end of the deal. So that's not the case with Josh Hart. You're talking about 18 million, then 19.6, then 21.1, and then 22.5. For him, I think it would be important for him in terms of taking care of his body and staying healthy. That would probably be the only thing I would maybe kind of just look at, because he's a player that gives up his body. This is a guy that not afraid to get on the floor, not afraid to throw his body around.
Calls himself a football player playing basketball.
Exactly. A guy who sees himself as almost like a defensive back. And the way he goes after rebounds, he goes after loose balls, goes after jump balls. Like, that's how he plays. So that would be the one thing I think I would be, mindful to watch if I was him and I was the Knicks, is keeping him healthy, because that is not something that's really been an issue in his career yet. And he is entering the prime of his career, but that could be something that you would have to just at least follow as his career continues.
Yeah, listen, there's no guarantees.
Right.
It's a decent chunk of change for a guy that's not a 15, 20-point scorer. But again, he does the things on the margins. He does the things that don't necessarily show up in the box score. He boxes out, rebounds well, makes that hockey assist, and importantly, contributes in ways the Knicks need, because there's been a lot of talk this offseason about, they needed 3-point shooting. They brought in DiVincenzo. Hopefully he'll improve their percentage, et cetera. But the Knicks were a better offensive team than they were defensively last season. And part of that is due to the fact that, the first half of the season before Hart arrived, they gave up far too many points. Hart on the floor brought those numbers down dramatically. And hopefully, having him for the full duration of the regular season will improve that Knicks defensive rating going forward.
Yep. So obviously, got to give a congratulations to Mr. Josh Hart, new Nick, new contract, locked in. He's now, really a part of the squad and part of the future. And hey, look, the Knicks. We're gonna talk in a bit about what comes next, but these are the kind of pieces you need to have in the fold for
Yeah.
if or when a big trade happens. You say, okay, we have this contract here, or if you do empty the cupboard, you say, well, this guy is still here. Like either way, like
Yep.
there's a value of Josh Hart still being on the team and being signed long term because when the earth shakes and there's furniture getting moved around, like you're gonna have to have stable pieces that are still here, and there's a good chance Josh Hart will be one of them.
And that's the one thing I heard, people responded on Twitter. "Oh, nobody cares. It's a role player. It's an over, not a lot, but they're, any negative
Yeah.
criticism was like, they don't have Jokic. They don't have Giannis. So like, should we ignore any, this is these are the plays. These are the additions that you surround the star. Obviously
Right.
the Knicks need another star, need another superstar to kind of take themselves from the 4 through 6 range, the win a first round series, get knocked out in the second round range to a true elite title contender. But again, to your point, having a guy like Josh Hart around the Brunson and that third and that other star, that other alpha is really important. And he's the perfect complementary piece if and when the Knicks can make that move. Or he's the guy that you include in a trade because his contract's relatively team friendly, kind of in that in between ground between a max contract and a mid level or even a rookie contract. That can kind of facilitate a trade that any team trading a star, any team is going to be happy to get back a player like Josh Hart. There's a reason that 3 or 4 teams have traded for him already.
I guarantee you one thing: those Nuggets fans who remember the Bruce Brown signing, I can guarantee you that they will say, "Hey, that was a big deal that we signed Bruce Brown." I think the Bucks fans who say, "Hey, when we signed Bobby Portis, that was a big deal. He helped us win NBA playoffs, NBA Finals games." When the Lakers signed, Dwight Howard or Rajon Rondo, yeah, those guys ended up being pretty important in the bubble when they actually needed those guys to perform. A KCP. So yeah, like sometimes with basketball, like we get so enamored with stars that sometimes we could think that these other guys are just kind of interchangeable. And we say that until you actually need these guys in the playoff series, and some of these guys rise up to the occasion and some guys don't. And then that ends up becoming the reason why some teams go home. So this is an important move for the Knicks. I'm happy they were able to get it done. And now it makes things very interesting for the future. So let's get to the topic right there. Like the Josh Hart deal is complete. But what comes next for the Knicks? It's been an offseason of note on several fronts. So right now we have, of course, the Josh Hart extension. We also had Obi Toppin get traded. We had Dante DiVincenzo be signed. We had a former second-round pick and Trevor Keels get cut. So it's not like the Knicks have necessarily brought in any superstars or anything, but there have been some important things that have happened over the past several months. Meanwhile, you come into the season, Manuel Quickly is entering the last year of his contract. He needs a contract extension potentially. Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau have just 2 years left on their deal. Tom Thibodeau becomes a lame duck if he doesn't get a contract this year going into next season. Evan Fournier remains unhappy with his playing time, and yet he is still a member of the New York Knicks. So I ask you, Tommy, what order of business you believe comes next for the Knicks now that the Josh Hart thing is in the rearview mirror?
Yeah, I think obviously the most important piece of business left on the table is the Emmanuel Quickly signing, potential extension, etc. But my sense is that both sides are going to delay that kind of, have a little game of chicken going on up until the start of the regular season. But both teams face a deadline before they have to, essentially lock into an agreement one way or the other. So I think that's going to get pushed back a little. We'll see, anything's possible, certainly. Maybe now that Knicks have to Josh Hart contract on the books and they know exactly what they're paying, et cetera. Maybe they'll, approach, IQ early next week and his representatives and say, listen, here's what we're thinking, where you, I'm sure they already had kind of periphery discussion, but here's the formal offer. What do you think, et cetera. And obviously all the other stuff you mentioned is on the table, is topics for discussion. The one thing that I think, and it doesn't look like, it's a point of, it's something the Knicks will focus on, but it's something I had thought, maybe in the back of my mind they might pursue is a backup power forward off kind of the free agent that fell through the cracks. We saw Derrick Jones Jr. just signed today with the Mavericks. He's off the board. Christian Wood's still out there. Would he settle for a 1-year deal at the?
It's amazing that guy has still not been signed. I don't know
which speaks volumes, and there's a reason. I just watched the Johnny Manziel documentary, and like there was a reason why a lot of teams had him off the board completely.
Right.
Some guys just all the talent in the world. They're not ready to contribute on a professional basis, etc. But yeah, there are other similar players. Obviously not as talented as Christian Wood, but there are other viable veteran talented backup fours that the Knicks could bring in and potentially play 10 to 15 minutes a night. We know about Tibbs' limited rotation, etc. But for all intents and purposes, the longer we get into August, the closer we get to training camp, it seems like the Knicks are seriously content to go into training camp with Josh Hart. Now, the multimillionaire Josh Hart, to make him earn that money and play heavy duty minutes at the 4, which, circling back to our previous conversation, is that what's best for his health long term? Is he going to last the whole regular season and into the postseason? But again, doesn't look like they have any. They signed Nathan Knight. On a 2-way contract. Maybe they'll see what he brings them in camp. Maybe they'll wait to see if somebody shakes out. Blake Griffin, one of those type of guys.
Yeah,
if they're still on the board, if they're not happy with Josh Hart, maybe they can, make a trade for one of those guys, or one of those guys will probably still be on the free agent market a month into the regular season. They can kind of reassess. But it's something we had talked about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, and it seems like they're content to kind of stick to the script and enter the season that way. So we'll see.
Yeah, the power forward thing is very interesting. I don't feel all that comfortable with how it's set up. Like, to me, I think to go into the season with Julius Randle as your only power forward, and I keep hearing the Jericho Sims and iHeart combination. We watched that last year. I mean, that's the thing about it. Like, it would be different if they just never tried it and say, okay, well, maybe this could work. I mean, that was some of the worst basketball we saw from the Knicks last season when they had to go with Jericho Sims playing power forward when Obi Toppin was out. I mean, that was a disaster. Now, that was before they had Josh Hart, so they didn't have that second option to do something else. But that didn't work at all. They had to scrap it, essentially. So, they've been kind of pitching us that maybe that could be a thing that they do this season, but I don't think that's going to work. Neither of those guys can stretch the floor. Harden sounds like a passer and a good ball handler, but he's more of a true 5. He's not a power forward, and Jericho Simmons is just a dunker essentially offensively. So I think that's definitely something they got to address. What you don't want is there to be an injury. Knock on wood, we don't want any injuries, but if, this is what happens. Julius Randle's been extremely durable. And if something freak happens and then you don't have anybody that can step in, even for a couple of weeks or a month, Knicks could be in a little bit of trouble. So I do agree. I would be interested to see if they find a way to address that in a more serious way. I think they've been, quite frankly, a little unserious with how they've approached the backup power forward position. The Emmanuel Quickly thing continues to be just something that I think is going to be interesting. Like, we've talked about it a bunch on this show. I have told you guys that in my heart of hearts, I really don't know. And I don't think that a contract extension will come to fruition with this, only because if Emmanuel Quickly signs an extension with the Knicks, and whatever the number is, if it's 90 to 75, somewhere around there, he's signing basically the prime of his career, or one of the most important parts of his career, of being a backup point guard. And if I was Emmanuel Quickly and I saw what I did when I entered the starting lineup, or I saw what I did when I got real starters minutes, I would say, hey, maybe I have all-star caliber potential, and I'm not going to sign a deal for less than $100 million or less than 105. And Jalen Brunson signed a deal that was essentially 109. Like, him and Brunson's numbers aren't that far off when you look at what Brunson did in Dallas and what Emmanuel Quickly did for the Knicks. So if you're the Knicks, are you going to give Emmanuel Quickly a contract equal to Jalen Brunson? That seems ridiculous. I don't think that you can, even though you got Brunson for an absolute steal. So that's going to be interesting. I think we're going to learn how much Emmanuel Quickly really values being a Knick. He says all the right things. I have no reason to think that he doesn't value it. But, this is, of course, a business, and this is where you're trying to maximize your earning potential. And as important as guards are in this league, and even backup guards can get paid money, it's different than being paid like an NBA starter, especially at the point guard position. So that continues to be the thing that I think will be interesting. We'll see if the Knicks come to an extension. The one thing I do that gives me hope for the Knicks is it feels like, besides the Obi Toppin situation, it feels like Knick players really kind of value this organization. They value this front office, particularly with Wes and with Leon, that it feels like they're able to smooth out any issues. Like Mitchell Robinson, when he became free agent and it looked like he may be gone, they gave him a contract and they wrapped their arms around him. We've seen what happened with RJ Barrett and his contract extension. It feels like that could be something that maybe gets them across the finish line if it does come to a tough negotiation with Emmanuel Quickley and his representatives.
Again, the one thing I'll mention is, again, I expect the things to drag out until there's an actual deadline. But if you're not going to commit to Emmanuel Quickley long term, I think you seriously have to consider trading him while his value is still relatively high, while the team, will have him under control. Look at the Raptors situation. Again, as we've talked about, what could the Knicks have gotten for Obi at this time last year? 12 months ago, we talked about it. There were polls where of the three young Knicks, Grimes, IQ, and Obi was the player that most fans wanted to keep and kind of viewed it as the most important long term. And then 12 months later, he's traded for 2 second-round draft picks. We talked about Hachimura and et cetera. So that is one cause for concern. I don't want the Knicks to trade IQ. Again, if they trade IQ, where's their backup point guard coming from? If they let him go to restricted free agency, that's a dangerous game to play. We'll see how it plays out. One quick thing, I just looked it up as we were talking. Hartenstein and Sims played 128 minutes together during the regular season, which isn't an inconsequential sample size, small but not inconsequential. Averaged just 106 points per 100 possessions offensive rating, while giving up over 109. So they had a -3 net rating. So again, wasn't
and that's against backups.
Correct.
Like that lineup is not playing against other teams' first units. Like that unit was playing as backups, and they were awful offensively, essentially. Right. And even the defense wasn't that great.
And it's not garbage time because Hartenstein's not going to be on the floor, for the garbage time.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, because again, like it wasn't Obi Toppin was out for like a month and a half. Like, it wasn't like a short amount of time he was out.
Right.
So like we saw those guys play together a considerable amount, and it was terrible. I mean, it was clearly those guys didn't match. It felt like watching. It's funny. I was actually talking to my dad about it yesterday. Like you see some of these teams and how they played in like the early 2000s, and you see these rosters and you see these front courts. You're like, how the hell the Knicks starting Othello Harrington and Kurt Thomas together? Like that was a thing. Like that happened. And like as bad as that front court was, and shout out to both guys, especially Kurt Thomas. He played for Knicks a bunch of times. He played an important member of the '99 team. But like that wasn't like abnormal. Like a lot of teams were playing 2 lumbering bigs who couldn't shoot like that, or couldn't shoot threes at least. That was like the norm.
Well, at least they had Moochie Norris and Shandon Anderson, to kind of hold down the backcourt. Listen, you give me PTSD, EJ. Come on now.
I'm sorry, Knicks fans. I know I don't want it to be a Kevin Brown situation. Both the Warriors, where all of a sudden the Audacy has to suspend me.
Be positive.
Yeah, I don't want to get suspended for bringing up old things with the Knicks, because boy, that would be a dark podcast. But like that was kind of what it felt like watching those guys play together. So that to me is a non-starter. Like that is not an option. So hopefully they come up to some kind of resolution with that. And I do think the Leon and Tibbs thing is really under the radar right now. I feel like a lot of fans really aren't paying that much close attention to it, but I feel like one of 2 things is going to happen. Either nothing's going to happen this year, and then like all of a sudden we're going to be in the middle of the season being like, oh my God, like what's the Knicks' future? Like, is Leon going to stay? Like, does he want to keep doing this? Like, what the hell is going on? Or you're going to get just a random press release, Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau extended, and it's going to lead to some hysteria. Some people will be happy, and it's going to be an explosive day on Knicks Twitter and the Knicks universe. But that means that's what's going to happen. either there's going to be nothing. They're going to just play this season out, and then we're going to go into the offseason essentially being like, we don't know what's going on, and then we'll have to wait for that maybe woe drop or to get the new press release to come out randomly during the summer, or again, it's going to happen sometime in the next couple of weeks or next couple of months, or maybe right before the season, all of a sudden press release Tom Thibodeau extended, and people are like, what the hell? Like it's, but that's the thing, because with coaches now, especially with coaches, like you cannot send a coach into his final year of his contract with 1 year. Like that's just not even a starter at this point for NBA coaches. These guys have sometimes 3-4 years left in their deal, and they're still getting fired. So you think that players are going to be locked into a coach that has 1 year left on his deal, especially if they don't like the coach? I'm not saying Knicks don't like Tibbs, but if Tibbs gets on these guys' nerves and they know he's on a 1 year deal, maybe they decide, maybe I'll tune this coach out. Maybe they'll get him out of here. So that can't happen. So they're going to have to do something about that, and they're going to have to do something pretty soon. So when we talk about things that come next, I wouldn't be surprised if it's something involving Leon Rose and Tibbs in their situations.
Fair point. Yeah, I see the organization wanting to kind of take care of that and just kind of have everything settled to avoid a situation. But like you said, I think the way we probably find out about it is it's Friday afternoon, Woj tweet where they're both locked in for like 10 years. And cause a lot of hysteria. But, listen, I think they've both earned an opportunity to kind of, at least for another year or so. And with the way things are trending in the right direction, that being said, as we've talked about, there's no guarantee that next year the Knicks, get off with flying colors.
That's true.
So there's always a possibility of a step back, some thin front court stuff, and Brunson takes a step back, and because he played at such an incredible level. I don't think it's going to happen, but again, nothing's guaranteed. So you would understand why Tibbs would want to get things and Rose get kind of their contracts locked down now, while there's definitely a positive public sentiment.
I'll tell you one thing: the day, if it happens that Thibodeau gets extended, that'd be a fun day in this Twitter and on this podcast. I will tell you that much. But that's going to do it, I think, with this edition of Orange and Blue Bloods. Thank you guys again so much for checking this out. Of course, this is a podcast you can get wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Make sure you hit the auto download feature on your streaming service. Get these episodes every time we drop. Also, be sure to check us out on YouTube as well. You can watch the full episodes and shorts from the episode on the WFAN YouTube channel. Tommy, let people know they can find you.
At Tommy Beer on Twitter.
You can find me, EJ_Stewart on Twitter, Action EJ on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. Thank you guys again so much for checking us out. For Tommy, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest podcast ventures. Links will be in the descriptions. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.